Hello, good Melbourneites, and everybody else, of course. Many people from Victoria came to Melbourne today, and of course, many people from Victoria, from Melbourne, from around Australia couldn't make it to the rally. But you know what? To those that could, huge thank you from the bottom of my heart. Today was another fantastic day. On the back of last week, I mean, you guys saw me last week. I was basically lost for words. I was just desperately trying to comprehend what I had seen. It was a fantastic day. But for me, like I know for a lot of you, you've been attending all of the rallies, particularly since they stopped shooting at us, and you've watched it get bigger and bigger and bigger. But for me, last week, I went from the rallies where they were shooting at us, and then I got arrested and I couldn't go to anything. And then I showed up last week and I didn't see, I mean, I saw it online, of course, I saw videos and what have you, but I I wasn't there for any of the build-up. And then it was just like you guys just dropped a bomb on my brain. I couldn't cope. So this week has been easier to kind of just mentally and emotionally deal with. I actually had more fun this week. Last week I was just in shock. I was numb for a couple of days afterwards. Whereas today, I really felt like yeah, I was actually I was really there, and I was with you guys, and so many of you came and said hello, and I'm so grateful for that. It made today a lot of fun. My voice is shot. It just exhausting, and as I'm sure it was for everyone there. It wouldn't just be me. Exhausting, but boy, oh so good. Someone has already asked about what I'm drinking, so this is. I was stopped by a bottle shop on the way home, actually, because I ran out the other night, which is a dangerous state of affairs. So I have fixed that problem. Yes, someone said, I bet they could hear you from home. I reckon even Danielle Andrews could hear us this week. I should have said that. I got off, sometimes you have a conversation, then you walk away from the conversation, you're like, oh, damn it. That's what I should have said. I got off the stage and I was like, oh, damn it. Even Danielle Andrews can hear us now. That would have been funny. But anyway, you don't get to give every punchline every single time. Okay, today's sacrifice to the smoking gods is a thing called a Room 101 hit and run. Now, Room 101 is a really weird cigar brand. It's actually owned by a guy who made his money in jewelry. And he decided he liked cigars, and he decided he wanted to start a cigar brand. So he did. He doesn't own any farms. He doesn't grow any tobacco. He just commissions other farms to grow tobacco. He blends it, and he pays other people's factories to actually make them for him. So it's purely a marketing exercise. As such, it can be a little bit hit and miss. The brands that are like that, and this is not the only one, they can be a little bit hit and miss. But I tell you what, I've been enjoying a lot of the Room 101 products, and I think his Fast Lonsdale, so the Room 101 Fast Lonsdale, I think was the second best cigar in 2016 or 2015 or something. It was rated number 2 in the world by Cigar Aficionado. So he's definitely got some really good sticks. I've never had this one. So I'm about to find out whether I like the Room 101 hit and run, it's called. A little bit tight on the draw. A little bit of tobacco in the mouth, but I think I'll just light it and see what happens. So guys, if you're new to a slow chat, it can be a little bit weird. Here's some random dude sitting on the internet, smoking a cigar, drinking whiskey, and talking a whole bunch of crap. This is my way of processing things. This is my way of decompressing. Cigars are a love of mine. They are my best friend at times, and sometimes when I need to think, a cigar is the only thing that is going to put bits of tobacco leaf in my mouth that I can't get rid of. It's the only thing sometimes that can clear my head. So I enjoy them. Some people love watching me smoke cigars and hearing me unpack thoughts. I had one person today tell me they don't particularly appreciate it, and I told them bad luck. Don't watch. So those of you that do know the slow chat format, you're already comfortable. You know that you need to settle in, get comfortable. Make sure you have a drink of something that you're going to enjoy. I've got, as I mentioned before, I've got the Aberlour 12 Speyside single malt, and I have some black tea to wet my whistle because my voice is very sore, very, very sore after today. And and I'm a little bit sunburnt. I mean, I'm always red. You guys have seen me. I'm beetroot. Yeah, it's annoying. But anyway, that's just how my skin is. I've put some aloe vera on, and hopefully I won't blister and I won't be too bad tomorrow. So think back to last week as I was sitting there after the other protest, like a bomb had been dropped on my brain, and trying to process what the hell I'd just seen. And think back to that. And I was trying to think through, what is Daniel Andrews' next move? Now that we've suddenly shown up with hundreds of thousands of people, all calling for him to resign, calling for the bill to get scrapped, for him to not get any more powers. What's his next move? And the thing that I settled on, and I wargamed a few different things, and none of them fit. The only thing that really came close to fitting was a fear campaign. Was for him to turn around and ramp up the fear to 11. And to be honest, I didn't really see much of that this week until pretty much yesterday, and then today again. And what we've seen now, actually, Voice of Victoria, Emily did a really good thing on this. Actually, let me read what she said, because I wanted to bring it up here. So Voice of Victoria. So if you're not following Voice of Victoria, do yourself a favor. Instagram, Facebook, look them up at Voice for Victoria. Absolutely freaking brilliant what Emily does. And I want to read you her post here. So let me just check that that's changing. Yeah, it is. Okay. So this is from today. Today we heard the government and crossbenchers were having a meeting. Turns out this was just advisors from Foley and the Premier's office allocating 30 minutes for a meeting on a Friday afternoon with 11 crossbenchers and many of their staff. Seems like it's going to be productive, right? Needless to say, the most productive thing achieved was the government can now tick a box saying they'd spoken to the crossbenchers. Problem is, all they spoke about, let me just hide that down there. All they spoke about was the original version of the bill and the government's own amendments, nobody else's. That's significant. We'll talk about that in a sec. While some questions did get answered, as usual, most didn't. Let me just check that that's working as intended. Yep, good. Most didn't, including some important ones. In the midst of bleating about how transparent they suddenly plan to be, the government retains that this apparently shouldn't apply to any past advice that's resulted in the current mandates. Speaking of, here's some tidbits. The government intentionally wrote the bill in a way that they can rely on verbal advice. It doesn't have to be written, and they're selectively seeking advice from those that they know predominantly already agree with their policy decisions so far. Despite the selectivity, it seems that there are some excessive internal cases of amnesia and confusion when it comes to providing straight answers about exactly what experts gave advice on specific and more controversial mandates like those segregating children. The government have promised crossbenchers, many of whom are actual empathetic human beings concerned about the disastrous impacts that these are having on a number of kids, another meeting to discuss the mandates. They've just failed to set a date or time when that will happen. Funny that. In the interim, all their nasty little lackeys, Reed Patton, the Greens, etc., have gone full tilt on social media today, posting chicken little panic garbage of, if this bill doesn't get through, we're all going to die. Won't somebody please think of the children, etc., etc. Maybe you should have thought of that before you were a pack of dogs and tried to ram this trash through without proper process, happily spitting in the face of other crossbenchers when you thought you could, and when challenged on it, just straight up lied to the public. Karma's a bitch. In short, the government trotting out their obedient lackey types, including the unions who have clearly done nothing effective to stop this government neglecting healthcare for years, but now suddenly care so much about the staff, just screams that they're in full-blown panic mode now. The bill is optimistically scheduled for debate on Tuesday, although with no deal currently in place, expect the panic porn, if this doesn't pass, in the media to kick up to 11 over the weekend. It'll no doubt get debated at some point next week, and wow, is it going to be a dogfight. That is Voice of Victoria. I cannot recommend highly enough that you follow them and follow Emily. She does amazing work with this. And Instagram and Facebook, she's posting regularly. She does there's two things I really appreciate about Emily and Voice of Victoria. Number one, she actually knows what she's talking about, and she takes the time to know the answers. Not everyone does that. I make mistakes from time to time, and I get things wrong because sometimes I'm busy, I'm doing stuff, and I want to get it out, and so I do, and then oops, I've missed a detail. Emily very rarely does that. She's very, very good at actually not publishing something until she's actually got the details right. No one's perfect, but Emily's very, very good. And secondly, she's not a catastrophist. She doesn't buy into any sort of hype and stuff. And often she's actually the one kind of going, okay, hang on, guys. I know you're all excited, but let's look at what the legislation says and let's talk about the process and sort of bringing it back to reality a little bit more. So I have a lot of time for Voice for Victoria. If you're not following them, follow them. And that was a sample of their work. I agree, basically. Now, I'm not going to say I agree with everything that she said because there's one or two things in there that might get her into trouble with defamation, etc. But I certainly agree with a lot of the sentiment and the assessment of what Daniel Andrews' play is from here. And I think she's correct. We began to see that this weekend. We began to see it yesterday, that fear campaign, the new fear porn campaign, has begun in earnest. Now, it's interesting to me. One of the things that I was wrestling with last week, for those that were watching, you will remember, I sat there wrestling with, okay, there's the fear campaign, but it's probably not going to work very effectively. So what else is there? And you'll remember I wargamed a couple of other options in my head, and I just kept coming back to the fear campaign. I couldn't see a better play. And I still can't. But I'm also quite convinced that the fear play isn't really going to work very effectively. So I'm sort of sitting here going, are they really running out of options? And that seems to be Emily's assessment as well. There's desperation really starting to kick in. They're running out of options. They are not having meaningful conversations with the crossbenchers. And I said during my speech today, Daniel Andrews yesterday on the news, he sounded downbeat. He sounded like he was halfway beaten. He was resigned to being beaten. Just his tone of voice, his demeanor, everything about how he was saying it. He was saying the right words. If you read them on a page, you'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, things are going well for him. But everything about him said, no, things are not going well for him. So if they are resorting to a fear campaign, which was the obvious choice, it was the only choice really that I could spot last week in response to the hundreds of thousands of people that showed up to that rally. If he is resorting to a fear campaign, if he is not able to get traction and meaningful engagement with the crossbenchers, it's the Friday before the last sitting week, and they're not even discussing the amendments that the crossbenchers have been insisting on. This is starting to really look like it's advantage us. It is really starting to look like it's advantage us. Now, it ain't over till the fat lady sings, right? Don't go popping the champagne corks just yet. But I think based on what I'm observing, based on my understanding of what Emily is saying there, based on some conversations that I've had with some MPs, nothing is certain. Please don't misinterpret this. Nothing is certain. But I think we're on the front foot here. And I think Daniel Andrews is on the back foot. And he is going to be scrambling to try and get something to happen. Because from his point of view, there is a lot more at stake here than just whether or not he gets this legislation. All right. Sorry, I just realized I haven't shown anyone's comments yet. Sky News, scrolling too fast. Where was that? Sky News said multiple hundreds of thousands. Okay, I didn't hear that. But I don't watch Sky News normally, so that would be why. I'm always interested in the different crowd estimates because they vary so wildly. But the reality is, crowd estimates are not a science. I mean, let me be clear. There is a science to it. There is a method to it. But ultimately, it's garbage in, garbage out. It comes down to a number of the assumptions that you make around what you can see. You use these crowd estimator tools and you cover an area of streets and you say, okay, there were this many people per square meter or per 10 square meters over this area. How many people were there? And it spits out a number. That number is pretty much meaningless because the density is going to be changing throughout any given crowd. It's always going to be more dense towards the middle. Once you start marching, people tend to spread out a little bit. It all depends on the assumptions that you want to make. So crowd estimates are always interesting. And I'm seeing multiple hundreds of thousands on Sky. I believe the police estimate was 20,000, which is pretty ridiculous, pretty ridiculously small, to be clear. But how do you prove who's right? And does it even matter? Do you need to be proving who's right? Just get the images out there. Get the images out there of just showing the crowd. That's what matters. The actual number, great. We can have an argument about the number, and that's probably an argument worth having, to be honest. But in the end, it's actually about the images, the video, the photos, all of that. Okay, so Archie's disagreeing. I think a fear campaign could work now, purely due to the new variant. I'm seeing the same game being played right before Delta was announced as a strain of concern. Yes, but it's not the first time we've seen this game get played, right? And when they simply go back to playing the same card, even if they're playing it better or louder than before, it means they're running out of ideas. And people become numbed. It's the boy who cried wolf, right? People become numbed to that kind of thing. Um, if they're just simply going back and playing the same card, that's interesting to me. That tends to indicate to me that they're getting to the bottom of their bag of tricks. It would be the best Christmas present, would be to have nothing replace the current state of emergency. So this is the state of play. The current state of emergency expires at the end of the 15th of December. So midnight, 15th of December. So morning of 16th of December, we wake up. The state of emergency is finished. Now, my understanding is that almost everything that is currently, all the restrictions and mandates, etc., almost all of them fall under the state of emergency. They're only able to be done because of the state of emergency. And so the moment that state of emergency expires, so do the vast majority, if not all, of the various requirements, mandates, restrictions, etc. Now, again, I'm not your guy when it comes to the real detail on that sort of stuff. So don't take my word for it that it's 100% all gone. But I think it's going to be pretty freaking close to 100% all gone once that actually happens, once the state of emergency ends. This is why Daniel Andrews is so desperate to get something in before the state of emergency ends. Because if the state of emergency ends and it takes him a few months to find a justification to start up a new one, then we're going to get a couple of months of living without all of those restrictions and be reminded of what life used to be like. And Christmas and New Year would be spent actually enjoying ourselves and not having to worry about the psychopath in Spring Street. But I think it would have a much deeper impact than that. This is what I said just before I stopped to light up the cigar. It is my opinion that his role as leader of the Labor Party is at stake on this legislation. If he can't get it through this week, in theory, he could call Parliament together to try and get it through again sometime this year or before the state of emergency ends. Just because it doesn't go through this week doesn't automatically mean that it's completely dead. It's pretty close. But I do think that if he doesn't get it through this week, he's not going to have a realistic chance of getting it through between the end of this week and the 15th of December. Like realistically, as much as in theory he could recall Parliament and push a vote, and there's things that can be done, if he doesn't have the support to do it this week, he's not going to find that support between the end of this week and the 15th of December. So this week is kind of the big one. And if he fails to get this up, that says some really interesting things about his leadership and his leadership position and the tenability of going into the next election with him in charge, despite what the polls may claim about his popularity. I don't think anyone now inside the Labor Party is going to try and roll Daniel Andrews and take his spot as the leader. I think because today, I believe it's today, is exactly a year until the next state election. I think it's literally 365 days from today. So anyone who's a minister, a finance minister, treasury or whatever it may be, the ones who are kind of the heir apparent to being the leader and being the premier, if that's the party that's in power, they would be looking around. They'd have one eye on Daniel Andrews and how strong his position is and whether he's actually secure as the leader. And they would have another eye on the election and the opinion polls and other things that are moving like that. And as they look, we're reaching a point now where I'm quite convinced Daniel Andrews is going to start to go downhill very quickly. Maybe not in the opinion polls. I think there's some things influencing opinion polls that I spoke about in a previous slow chat, the self-selection bias being one of the biggest issues there. But I think Daniel Andrews is going to start to go downhill very quickly in how tight his grip is on power inside the Labor Party. If he fails to get this vote through and he fails to get emergency powers in place before the end of the state of emergency, I think that is going to send a shockwave through his support base. And a lot of people politically are going to be realizing and recognizing what that means. And what it means is his power has peaked and he's now coming off his peak. Doesn't mean it's all about to fall apart necessarily. But his best days are behind him. His most powerful days, his most influential days are behind him. And in political circles, that then immediately gets people to do two things. Number one, get ready to distance themselves from him so that as he falls, they don't get dragged down with him. And number two, get ready to step in and fill the void if he falls. Now, again, there's no guarantee that he's going to fall straight away. But as soon as the psychology changes for these other cowards who call themselves politicians, they are all cowards. They've got one finger to the wind, trying to see which way the wind is blowing and get on the right side of the breeze, so to speak. They're power hungry. They want to climb that greasy pole, and they all want to be the premier. Their loyalty doesn't exist in reality. They've been in lockstep behind Daniel Andrews, not out of loyalty, not because they share values, not even because they like the guy, but because his grip on power was so tight that going against him would have been career suicide. That's why Daniel Andrews has had the party so disciplined behind him now for, approaching 8 years or something. So you then have to ask, how does that unfold? They've got one eye on Daniel Andrews. The message from this week, if he doesn't get new emergency powers through, is that his power has peaked. He's had his best days, and now he's coming down. No one knows how quick that'll be. No one knows how dramatic that'll be. But there's an election a year away. And there's a second calculus that comes into play now as people are looking for their opportunity. They're saying, oh, this might be my chance. I might be able to take the top spot. I might be able to become the premier. Okay, fine. Do you want to do that off the back of a premier who has some of the biggest political demonstrations in Melbourne history against him, with only a year to set a new policy agenda, to hope that a lot of the public forget, to rebuild the image of the party and to establish yourself as this new leader so that you get judged on your leadership rather than Daniel Andrews? Daniel Andrews has been in power for 8 odd years now. This election is a referendum on him. And changing leaders now, it's too soon. It's too close. With only a year, it's still going to be a referendum on Daniel Andrews. So if you think that Daniel Andrews is going down and you're the person who might replace him, you'd probably think twice about moving now. Maybe you would wait until after the next election. He loses the election. He gets torn down from being in leadership of the Labor Party. And then you can step in and say, hey, guys, we get it. You voted him out. You voted us out. We understand you're not happy with what we did. Here's my new agenda. Here's my new vision. Here's the new leader, blah, blah, blah. And they rebuild from there. Victoria is a very heavily left-leaning state. So even if they lose one election, they're probably going to expect to get voted back in the next election like they did with the one Liberal leader that we had, who was a complete wet rag, complete waste of time. Anyway, since Kennett, there's been one Liberal leader elected, and he was utterly useless, to the point that I can't even remember his name. So this is where it gets really hard for me to try and make a judgment call. On the one hand, Daniel Andrews, if he does not get new powers up, which he may, but it's getting hard. But if he does not get new powers up, that is going to be seen very clearly as a signal that he's come off his peak. His powers are now waning. He's on his way down. Don't know how fast, don't know how soon, but he's on his way down. That puts everyone else on notice that their chance to have a crack at that top spot is coming soon, but they actually may not want it yet. The ones, particularly the younger ones, are going to be quite happy to go into opposition for 3 years and then 4 years, whatever it is, I can't even remember, and then come back at a new election, right, as the leader of the party or having been promoted into cabinet or whatever it may be. The older ones that are getting towards the end of their career, they're the ones who might be sitting there going, if not now, I'll never get my shot. Because they might be sitting there going, okay, I'm in a position where I can make a shot for the leadership. If I let Daniel Andrews go to a loss at the next election, I might run one more time. I might have run in that election and then I'll go through there, but I'm not running again after that. And so if we spend an entire term in opposition, then I'll never get my shot at being premier. So if I want my shot at being premier, I have to do it now. I'm going to move now against Daniel Andrews, even though I know that it's not ideal and I'm probably going to go to an election loss at the next election. But at least at that point, I've had my chance as premier. I got to where I deserve to be, kind of idea. Now, I don't know the party well enough. I don't know any of the parties well enough to really try and make an assessment of who might make which kind of a move. But I think what we're going to see, assuming that Daniel Andrews doesn't get anything up in the next week, we're going to see the Labor Party's support for Daniel Andrews become instantly very fractured. And it will happen overnight because he's already very unpopular. There's so many people in there that hate his guts, but they have to appear to be in lockstep with him because he's had such a grip on power that they can't afford to stand up to him. And so all of a sudden, the minute they go, you're no longer at your best, you're no longer all powerful the way that you used to be, all of a sudden, I think we're going to see those differences really become exposed and very visible. And if you think IBAC and Adam Somyurek and all that stuff was fun and there was lots of dirt being, lots of dirty laundry being aired in public, wait till they're no longer in lockstep behind Daniel Andrews. I think it's going to be fun. So that would then mean that Daniel Andrews is going into an election with a whole bunch of leaking going on from within the Labor Party against him. He's stuck as the leader because potentially no one wants to make a move against him. Maybe they all just go, no, too toxic. I don't want to make a move against a sitting leader only a year away from an election that we internally, I think they know they're going to lose. And now, okay, so here's why I think that. I said 2 nights ago, not to read too much into the fact that 3 Labor MPs had come out and all said, hey, we're not going to run at the next election. Okay, don't read too much into that. It happens at every election. There's always people retiring out of politics. But I thought about it some more. I mean, 3 became 4. And I thought about it some more and I went, 4 people announced within 48 hours of each other. That's the bit. It's not the fact that 4 people have announced they're not running again. That's not especially remarkable. It's not that far out of the ordinary. But all announcing within 48 hours, that's almost like they're trying to draw attention to it. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know. I don't know whether anything should be made of that. But I have to wonder whether there's internal Labor Party polling that is indicating a very different conclusion, a very different outlook to the polling that's been shared publicly. The public polling is saying everything's rosy. Everyone loves Daniel Andrews. He's got this wonderful support. He's doing so well on a preferred leader against Matthew Guy, which doesn't surprise me. Where's Matthew? Where's Matthew Guy? Seriously. But I just wonder, 4 MPs announcing within 48 hours of each other that they're not going to run again. 4 MPs not running again, not that remarkable. Announcing within 48 hours of each other. That's interesting. I don't know. I'm just going to keep an eye on it. I think this week is an absolute pressure cooker week for Daniel Andrews, an absolute test of leadership, and one that I hope and I suspect he will fail in terms of he won't be able to get his legislation through. I think the Labor Party has been pretending to be unified and pretending to be supporting Daniel Andrews for quite some time, and they are ripe for a very rapid shift. The minute his power is in doubt, I think we're going to see a lot of stuff happen inside the Labor Party very, very quickly, and the run into the election is going to be popcorn worthy, I suspect. Is it 5? I'm seeing a 5th now. Okay, I'm obviously out of the loop. So, okay, there's 5. All right, I'll take your word for it because, yeah, I'm obviously out of the loop. With the documentary and family life and getting ready to do the speeches like today and stuff like that, I do end up with extended periods of time, days at a time sometimes, where I'm actually just really out of the loop. So I apologize. Apparently there's now 5. Announced today, says Haley. Announced on a Saturday. Interesting. So that's 5 in what, 72 hours? That's a good quote there, James. Let me get that up. Preferred leader is a meaningless stat in a Westminster system. Not entirely meaningless, certainly not as meaningful as it's made out to be. Journos love it though, probably because it's nice and simple, or because they are. I like your use of words, James. I like that. Okay, so John Aaron is apparently number 5. 5 in 3 days. Yeah, so 5 in 72 hours. Thanks for the updates, guys. I do appreciate that. Sometimes I'm a bit thick, and I think a lot of people had already said 5 before I actually noticed it, so I apologize. Um, so Daniel Andrews needs to get something through, I think, not only to save face, but to actually save his leadership. I think if he fails to get something through this week, that will be looked back on as the beginning of the end of his leadership. His leadership won't fall apart instantly, and it may not even fall apart. He may make it to the election for the reasons that I just discussed. But I think that will be viewed as the beginning of the end of his leadership. I hesitate to use the word because I don't think he deserves it, but whatever. Got to ask, did your wife just run to Bunnings to buy a doghouse or just chuck a sleeping bag at you? Yeah. So for those that may not know what that's referencing, I made the decision that the protests were too big to run with just little sound systems like what they'd been using previously. And I got in touch with the organizers of today's protest, which, like I said to you the other night, different to the organizers of last weekend's protest, who are different again to the organizers of next Saturday's protest. There's different groups organizing different things. They all have their own connections, their own focus, their own particular messages that they want to get out there. And they all attract slightly different crowds. They have very different speakers and that sort of stuff. But I made the decision that from the public's point of view, it's another protest. They don't recognize these distinctions. And so we just had to get behind whoever it was, whoever's running the next one. We've just got to get behind them. And, some will do a better job than others. Some will be bigger than others. Some will do marches and some will do car convoys like this coming weekend. Maybe the car convoy will work brilliantly. Maybe it won't. I don't know yet. I don't have a crystal ball. But you know what? I'm just going to get behind it. I'm going to support it because from the public's point of view and from the media's point of view and from the crossbenchers' point of view, it's just a singular movement, right? And if you have one really bad week, and maybe it might be, it might go really badly one week because the organizers were terrible or the messaging was bad or the advertising didn't really get out there as much or whatever the reason might be. We might have a really bad week. That's going to be viewed and interpreted by those that want to see it this way as, oh, see, they're losing momentum already. They don't have staying power. They're already giving up. Which, of course, wouldn't be true, but that's how they would want to spin it. That's how the media might spin it if they reported on it at all. So I made the decision that I just needed to get behind whoever has the next one. And the next one, of course, was the one we had today. And I got in touch with him and I said, listen, you need a bigger sound system. And I don't just mean bring a few more speakers to put on speaker stands. I mean, you need a proper outdoor PA system. And I know people who do that sort of thing and do it very, very well. And so I offered and I said, listen, I'm willing to pay for it. I'll stump up the cash. It's a lot of money, but I'll stump up the cash to get it there because we need it as part of the movement. We can't have people showing up to these things and sitting down the back and they can't hear jack. They're not going to come back again, especially if it happens to them 2 or 3 times. They're not going to keep coming back. People come to these events live because they want that interaction. They want that atmosphere. And sitting at the back, unable to hear what's being said, no one's coming back a second, or they're certainly not coming back a third time. So I rang them up and I made that offer. I've been trying to get in touch with them since the Monday. I finally got in touch with them on the Wednesday and they said, look, thank you. That's really kind. We really appreciate that. But actually, we've had other people offering to bring PA support. And we've decided to take up one of their offers. And I went, okay, phew, one less thing for me to do, right? Because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to drain my bank account and have the headache and the hassle. So I was quite happy when they said that. They've got it sorted. Fantastic. Then on Thursday, they got back in touch with me and said, oh, look, the things that we thought we had in hand have kind of fallen through. Can we take you up on your offer? And that left me with less than 48 hours. Yeah, so Bev is making the point. We heard nothing at Parliament House. Yes, and this is the problem. All right, so I didn't supply a sound system to Parliament House. I provided the sound system that was at Treasury Gardens. And this is a problem, and it's a challenge. And I don't blame the organisers, by the way. Put yourself in their shoes. 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, we were getting shot at. Bringing a sound system was out of the question. Then all of a sudden things changed and we began to get momentum. But initially, a couple of speakers were fine for the crowds that happened maybe 5 weeks ago. And now all of a sudden, you need massive outdoor PA systems. I mean, proper professional equipment, and that's happened really quickly. So I don't blame the organisers for a split second. And yes, unfortunately, at Parliament House, they didn't really have a system that was up to the job. But again, I don't blame them. Like they are working their asses off trying to catch up and keep up with how fast this is changing. And keep in mind, again, it's not the same organisers. So the people organising this week, they've watched last week's protest, and many of them do attend, and they come along and they support each other's protests, which is great. But they weren't part of the organising, and so there's got to be communication. They're talking to each other, they're learning each other's lessons. But it's a game of catch up. It's changed so quickly. So I said, okay, fine. I accept the challenge. I got less than 48 hours. I rang someone that I've worked with before. He gave me a quote. I said, okay, no problem. Let's get this done. Then began a series of problems to do with payment and getting it to clear in his account fast enough. I ended up having to actually go into a bank. That was a nightmare in itself, trying to withdraw like that much cash. They don't just want you to do it over the counter. You can't just walk in and get it. You've got to organize it. But then banks these days, you can't call the branch. So you have to call the call center, and then the call center sends an email, and then you wait for a call back, and that call back doesn't come. It was a whole thing. It was Friday afternoon before I finally had the cash in my hand that I could walk into the other bank and deposit it into his account. Anyway, so that was I lost a day of my life just on that. But anyway, they were good. They had the gear, they've got the crew, they know what they're doing, they know how to do it. Organized everything. The protest organizers were fantastic, and we had lots of emails and phone calls and messages going backwards and forwards, making sure that the PA crew knew what their instructions were and knew what to do, because they had to get there at about 6 o'clock in the morning in order to be ready to start playing by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Like it takes 6-7 hours to set up a system like that from scratch. They had to rent a second generator because I wanted to run such a powerful system. So they had one generator, they had to rent a second one. So they had different generators running different sides of the PA system. But they did it. They did their job, and they showed up. And pretty quickly, the police went, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And we had to get the organisers down there to help sort that out. There was looking for a little while that we weren't going to allow that we weren't going to be allowed to have the towers, and the towers are pretty important. Not only do they provide stability, believe it or not, those towers were the most stable and safe way to deploy the speakers in the windy conditions that we had today. Stacking them on top of each other would have been incredibly unsafe. And but they also are important for how far the sound travels. Getting those speakers up into the air is why the sound is able to reach out a kilometre or so, because it doesn't just hit people straight away. So there was this whole thing. Council got involved, the police got involved. Eventually, they all just went, "Okay, fine, you can have your sound systems," and I'm grateful for that. And then, yeah, everything happened at Parliament House. Unfortunately, they weren't able to have a big system there, so I apologise to those that weren't able to hear. Amazing march. You guys were incredible. Just have a look at my live stream. Have a look at the photos, the drone footage from Carl's J Soda on Instagram, and I think she's actually posted some of that to my Instagram as well. She helps me with Instagram. I think she may have posted some of her stuff actually onto mine. So have a look at Instagram to see some of the crowd shots during the march and that sort of stuff. Just phenomenal. And then finally returned back around via Flinders Street to the Treasury Gardens. And that's where it just got, for me, it got really, really fun. So people are asking how they can chip in to help support or help pay for the speakers. Preferably by buying a t-shirt. This says, "I was there at Parliament House, 27th of November, 2021. And this is limited edition. It is for sale from midday today till midday tomorrow, and then it will never be provided by me ever again. This is specifically so that you can start conversations. You wear this to Christmas, or you wear this to New Year's or whatever. You sit down, you've got 'I was there' on your shirt. Sooner or later, someone's going to be like, 'Where's there? Where were you? What happened on that day?' And it just opens up the conversation for you. And you can say, 'Hey, listen, let me tell you about what's been going on.' And especially, it'd be beautiful if it's that family member that never wants to talk about this stuff. That would be cool. So what I did was, working with Brad, who runs the company that takes care of all my shirts, we created a new product designed by Carly and we have, I've lost my train of thought. Yes, I'll put the URL in for you now. So it's www.topherfield.net/I was there. All right, so that should show up in both YouTube and Facebook comments. So you should be able to just click on that. Now, there's been a lot of demand on the website, and the website wasn't really set up for that amount of traffic. So if it has a glitch, please try again. But also, I believe that some people are having trouble with specific browsers. Some people are having an issue where they add it into the cart, then they go to pay and there's nothing in the cart. If that's you, can you open up a different browser and try again? Because that seems to solve the problem. But yes, if you would like to help me cover the cost, then that would be appreciated. So Paul says, the sound was great today. Any idea if it can or will be done again? Yes, I do have some idea. So it depends on how well this fundraiser goes. So if I get back all the money I put into today's sound system, then the remainder, the leftover, go towards future protests. And again, I don't care who's organizing them. What's the next protest? That's the next protest. Okay, get in touch with the organizers. How can I support you? What do you need? So I will be doing a slow chat once I know what the sales figures are, because the sales close at midday tomorrow. I'll be doing a slow chat where I will break down. I'll show you the report of how many sold and how much money came in as a result of that. I will show you the receipts of where the money has been spent and tell you how much is left in the kitty, and then how I plan to use that going forward. So my commitment to you is that all of it is going to be used supporting the protests in ways that I think will make a difference. So things like a sound system, in my opinion, were really important. That was an area where we were really letting ourselves down. Again, no criticism of the organizers for all the reasons I mentioned already, but it was an area that we had to improve. And we've done that. And I hope to continue that trend. And I hope to make sure that every time people show up to one of these events, they can hear and they can engage and they can really feel like they're a part of something, not just on the fringe in the background somewhere. So definitely things like sound systems, potentially trying to improve the internet connectivity so that people like Rukshan's streams can actually go through uninterrupted. I noticed I did 2 streams during the march today on my 5G, because I've changed my plan and I've now got 5G thanks to some feedback that you guys gave me the other day. They came out beautiful. As soon as I was in the park, 5G didn't reach into the park. It's quite a short range thing. It didn't reach into the park. It dropped to 4G, and that was crap. That stream, it kept breaking up. It kept on stopping and freezing, and that's because it dropped back to 4G. So the answer to the question, Paul, is it depends on how many resources I'm given. If I'm given enough resources to go and do it again, I don't want to reach into my bank account and keep on being at risk of losing money every single protest. I've taken that risk on this protest. But from here on in, it's going to be a case of, if I've got money in the kitty, it will go into, not necessarily all of it on one protest. I'll look at where, the law of diminishing returns, right? Where can I spend money intelligently that's going to move the needle and make this a better success? Spend that money and then hold the next lot over in reserve and hold the next lot over in reserve, because we might have a fair bit of work left to do. We don't know. We don't know how much longer this is going to have to go on for. So, yeah, that's the situation with that. So I dropped the link into the comments. So the reason for the doghouse reference is because I kind of made the decision to do this without actually really talking to my wife. She did know about it before today. Just to be clear, I was only kind of joking that she didn't know about it today. But I did make the decision and then kind of go, okay, honey, guess what we're doing with our savings, what's left of them. But look, my wife's amazing. Those of you that have met her, she's absolutely amazing. And she's so supportive, and she didn't even really bat an eyelid. If I'm honest, all jokes aside, all sort of trying to have fun aside, she didn't even really bat an eyelid. She was there last week with me. She understood the problem. She understood exactly where I was coming from. And Dion says, am I red in the face because of the sun or because of Mrs. Field's backhands? A little bit of both. No, I'm always red. I just have a really red face. I don't know why. The rest of my skin's not that red, but my face is just always red. But yes, I'm also sunburnt today. So people are asking, can I get the shirt even if I wasn't there? Yes, I can't stop you from buying it, and I'm not going to stop you from buying it. But if you were there in spirit and you were there supporting us in whatever way you can from wherever you were, and you want to help to pay for the sound system, then absolutely jump on the link and do that. There was another point that I was going to make. Okay, well, hopefully that'll come back to me at some point. Okay, my partner met your partner, and now she wants to try a cigar because your partner did. When we were in Venezuela, we were at a wedding in Venezuela, first year of our marriage, and I sat down to have a cigar, as did a couple of the other guests, and then my lovely wife came over and joined us, and I handed her a cigar, and she lit that up and smoked it with us, and it caused an absolute sensation because apparently, as much as they are a very heavy cigar smoking culture, women don't do it. And I actually was a little bit surprised by that because in my world, yeah, women smoke cigars. Of course they do. But yeah, for them, it caused quite a stir amongst the Venezuelan locals. It was kind of funny. Okay, so Django is saying you can't stop me. He said earlier, it scrolled by. He said you can't stop me from buying one. I'll buy two now. Hey, I'm not gonna complain if it helps me to get that. It was under 15 grand. It was just under 13 grand is what the final figure came out to be. If that gets that money back into my bank account, then so be it. But it does close on at midday tomorrow, right? It is a limited edition. You buy it now or you miss out. Grebo says he tried 3 browsers. Guess you might be a little busy. Hope so. Yeah, that's a worry. And Ishnis is saying a server error. So look, he did say to me, Brad, who runs the company, did say to me that his server is pretty slow. He's getting it upgraded next week. Unfortunately, couldn't get it done in time for this. So I do suspect that might be the problem. But if you could just persevere, guys, I'd really appreciate that. AAPI, thanks for asking. It is called The Cigar Professor. Look me up on Facebook is the best way to get in touch with us. Wow, that's going back a little while. So this was 2015, I think. I see you've had a photo with Rukshan. Well done. 2015, I think I told the story of our time in Venezuela. It was cool. I titled the speech Condoms, Toilet Paper, and Venezuela, if I remember rightly, was the name of the story. And I don't think I actually ever told the condom story properly. Okay, so Tracy's saying, I can't get on either. Yeah, okay. Tried 3 browsers, can't get to website. Yeah, wow. Okay, hang on. Yeah, so Marco, I hope that's all it is. That the t-shirt server is overloaded. But what I can do, if you'll bear with me, I'll actually send a text to Brad right now and just get his confirmation that there are actually, can you guys, if you've successfully ordered just now, can you throw a message in and just say, yep, we're in. So yeah, okay, website is struggling. Okay. Yeah, so other people have successfully ordered. It was outside Parliament when I ordered mine. I know some people definitely, yeah, so Paolo's saying the shirt website did load for him. Others are saying that it didn't load for them. Firefox works, apparently. Okay, so, yeah. So, where did that go? It jumped. Oh, yeah, I ordered mine. There we go. I was able to order. Okay, so, look, the site can't handle a lot of traffic. I apologize for that. So if you could just persevere, maybe wait a couple of hours or what have you. I'll post the link again towards the end of this chat, and hopefully, if we just sort of spread it out a little bit, good people. James, you're on fire. You're on fire tonight. Good people break under-resourced servers. Yes, you just broke an under-resourced server. That's what you did. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that heaps are buying. It just means that there we go. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean heaps are buying. It's just it's not a well-resourced server. Ordinarily, Brad doesn't sell a lot of his own merch on his own site. Normally what happens is someone like myself would come to him and he'll do the manufacturing, but I do all the merchant side of things. And I said to him, I don't want to handle the merchant side of things. I want you to handle everything. And he agreed, and he's been absolutely brilliant at it, but his server isn't really specified for that job. So he's upgrading it next week. He put that plan in place about 2 weeks ago, and then all of a sudden I dropped this on him and I'm like, hey, we got to do a flash sale. So had a suggestion, maybe extend the sale. Midday tomorrow is when it finishes. I would imagine that if you were to try again tomorrow morning and then try again, a bit before lunch tomorrow, whatever, I can't imagine it's going to stay this busy. Like, it's only this busy because I'm talking to you guys. There's a couple of hundred people watching, and obviously a few dozen of you at one time have gone on to do it, and that's enough to crash this particular site, unfortunately. So if we could just persevere, we are getting more resources behind that in the coming weeks. So that shouldn't be a problem with any future stuff. But I'm sorry, we're just going to have to be patient and persevere with it today. Fiona says, great to meet you today, Topher. Another great speech. Well, thank you. I do appreciate that. And I so thoroughly enjoyed so many of you coming and saying hi. A lot of people wanting selfies, which always mystifies me. But hey, you know what? I'm happy to do it. If that's something that you want, fantastic. And it is just such a pleasure to hug so many of you, to speak to so many of you, to hear little bits of your stories. Unfortunately, in that sort of context, there's never much time to really, sit down and have kind of a proper chat. But I just do appreciate so much that so many of you took the time to come and say hi. And, it means a lot to me. This movement means a lot to me. And getting to this moment is one of the biggest thrills of my life. And having just this weird, I don't know, somehow I became one of the many sort of figures in the middle of this thing. And it's a privilege. And yeah, it makes me feel wonderful. And it makes a lot of the risk and a lot of the work feel really worthwhile. So thank you. Okay, so I was talking about Daniel Andrews, his pivot. What happens if he doesn't get this through? What are the implications for the election? What's going on with all of the resignations? Talked about the sound system and the t-shirts. Melissa Hay asking the big questions. Did I restock the whiskey? Yes, I did. I restocked. And I grabbed another bottle while I was there because it was on a really good special. This is kind of my go-to Dimple 12. It's a blended whiskey, cheap, but good, very drinkable, but cheap. And that's kind of that's the one that just is perpetually on the shelf. And I didn't have that. Did I buy the rights to the Evil Faces one? No, we're doing a profit split. So it didn't cost me anything, but he agreed to allow me to put it onto my Topher merch, whatever. And he gets half of the proceeds and I get half of the proceeds. So that's a really good outcome. I think, obviously, through me, he can reach a lot more people and sell a lot more shirts. But it's a brilliant design and exactly the kind of thing that I'm proud to have associated with the Topher brand. So I think it's a really, really big win-win. Okay, so what happens if he does get this through? That's a really good question. It depends on what it is. He's not going to get through what he tried to get through. That's not going to happen. We know that already. The crossbenchers have made that very, very clear, and they would make themselves look incredibly dumb if they were to backflip on that now. They've all boxed themselves in. They can't turn around and agree to the original deal, the original legislation. So if he gets something through, it's not going to look like what he tried to get. It's anybody's guess what it will look like. We can't be sure. It'll certainly be watered down, as Anna says. It will be watered down. Oops. Yeah, Victoria, the state to be free. Yeah, the place to be free. Yeah, that's I could turn that into a t-shirt easily enough. What would he get through? Well, I think thanks to the Law Institute of Victoria, thanks to the QCs who spoke up, thanks to Voice for Victoria, thanks to so many others, many politicians as well, we have a pretty good understanding of what's wrong with this bill. Superficially speaking, many of the powers, I mean, some of them are outrageous, but many of the powers are not. They're actually within the confines of what's already possible under a state of emergency. But there are a few that are absolutely outrageous and have no place in a democratic society. And the lack of oversight is even scarier than what we have under a state of emergency. So those two things become very significant. Those are the things that have really been identified by the Law Institute of Victoria and QCs and politicians, etc., as the real concern. So I can't see it getting through without being heavily watered down, and the effect of that being that he doesn't have any more power than what he would have under a renewed state of emergency, and hopefully less. What do we do? Depends on two things. It depends on what the actual legislation is and what it looks like, and whether it still has any of these really concerning elements. I mean, the whole thing's kind of concerning, but some things are very concerning. There are some things where it'd be a case of, okay, battle stations, we've got to hit the streets, we've got to stop this now. There would be other things where it may not be that drastic. The reaction may not need to be that drastic. But the other factor is, how much damage does Daniel Andrews have to do to himself politically in order to get something to pass? Like I said, he's highly motivated to get something to pass. But if he ends up passing some totally watered down thing that looks nothing like what he tried to get in the first place, he does himself an enormous amount of damage to his credibility, to his grip on power, all the things I talked about before. He could potentially get something passed and still have essentially scored an own goal and done himself an enormous amount of damage. So I'm just thinking it through. I can't see him getting anything through like what he started with. The crossbenchers have all boxed themselves into a corner where they can't do that. If he gets something through, it's going to come at a significant political cost to him, and we'll have to have a chat then and say, right, what does the world look like now? What is his grip on power now? Yeah. Let's have that chat then. It's interesting. But it depends on so many variables. Look, I'm not going to wish a fall down the stairs on anyone, but I think his narcissism, and not so much his narcissism, Emily with Voice of Victoria really nailed it in her commentary that I read out at the start of the show. He treated the crossbenchers that were not supporting him like dirt. One, out of vindictiveness, because I think that's a part of his nature, but two, because he felt like he didn't need them, right? Now, all of a sudden, he's going back, crawling on his knees, begging them for support, and they're making him pay, right? They are making sure that it hurts. And so I think his narcissism is absolutely coming back to bite him, and we're seeing that right now. And that's why I think this episode is going to turn into such a damaging episode to him, and I think it will be looked back on as the beginning of the end of his leadership. Regardless of what happens, if he gets a watered-down bill through or if he gets nothing through, in either case, I think this is the beginning of the end of his leadership. He may go as far as the next election, only because, as I said before, other people may not want to roll him so close to an election. But I don't think he'll survive much beyond that. Politically, let's be clear. I'm talking about politics. This is a good one. I touched on this before, but I didn't necessarily talk about the why. It's apparently 5 now, by the way. I only got informed by my viewers tonight that actually there's apparently a 5th person who announced today that they're also stepping down. It's normal for a certain number of MPs to not continue on at every election. In almost every election in Australian history, I would be sure that there was probably at least one politician that used that as their opportunity to bow out of politics. And sometimes there'd be considerably more. You've got 100 and whatever people in politics at any given time. Statistically speaking, some of them are towards the end of their careers. Some of them are just not enjoying it and want to go on and do something else. And so they're going to choose not to go for re-election. The fact that 5 now, all announced within 3 days, within 72 hours of each other, that's the bit that I find interesting. I think that they were trying to draw attention to it, not to draw public attention, but to make a statement within the party. And what I need to do, and this, it's probably never going to happen because with everything else going on with the documentary, etc., I just don't have time for it. But what I would need to do is actually look at who it is and where their factional power base lies, and try and understand whether there is a factional message being sent within the Labor Party itself. Maybe not, right? That might be a dead end. But that's where I'd be looking first, to try and understand who are these people within the context of the Labor Party's factional battles, and is a message from one faction being sent to others, Why did they choose to pack all of their announcements so close together and at a moment in time where it was going to be obviously and easily interpreted by people like us as Daniel Andrews losing his vice-like grip on power, as a challenge to his power, as rats leaving the sinking ship, as many people are suggesting. So, yeah, hard to say. It's one of those things that I'd be in great danger of really reading into it far too much if I tried to go any deeper than that. But the first place I would be looking is at the factional battles and seeing what that might. Are they all from the same faction? What messages might be being sent? Yeah, Laurel says no such thing as coincidences. Comments about the cigar, all good. Yeah, so I've mentioned people have asked about Ricardo Bossi before. I've not really had time to actually wrap my head around what he is sort of doing and what his focus is. It's something that I want to do, but it's going to have to wait until after the documentary's done. I look like a total wanker. Cool. I don't care. Have a nice day. Any pink t-shirts? Listen. He's up with the pink. No, I didn't. In the end, I meant to talk to Brad about the pink t-shirts today, and with everything else going on, I never did. I need to ask him about that and whether he can get some in. I am glad your wife is still talking to you now. I need to get some photos up here. Sky Ads, thank you for the reminder. Give me a sec. Because Sky Ads sent me some fantastic photos that put a big ass smile on my face today. Let me just, it's going to take me a minute to get there because I didn't have the page open. I wasn't planning on doing this. I'd forgotten about it. Not forgotten, but like in the context of the show, I hadn't thought about it. Loading the page. Oh goodness, I have a lot of new messages that have come through. Okay, I'm going to have to do a search because I can't find Sky Ads. Found. Nope, that's no good either. Right. Okay. Well, this might be not as straightforward as I thought. Yeah, people sending me messages that the oh man. Okay, guys, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to oh, maybe it was it an email, Sky Ads? Was it an email that you sent me, or was it a Facebook message? Gary Biggs, thank you. I had forgotten that. Search for Gary Biggs. There we go. Okay. Guys, let me just share this page with you. Stop that screen. Share. Oops, not that. Sorry, guys, I got fat fingers tonight. I am hitting all kinds of wrong buttons. Okay, share a window. Share a Chrome tab. Okay, cancel that. Let me just get that out into its own window. Let's try sharing again, shall we? Share screen. Share a window. There it is. Okay. So there is Gary of Sky Ads fame, who flies a plane up around the Queensland-New South Wales border with these incredible banners on the back of it. Some really great slogans. He's done some really great work, and he's relentless. He's always up there, flying every single time there's a protest. So Gary, good on you, mate. But you put a big smile on my face, taking the time to take a selfie of yourself whilst flying your plane, wearing one of my Good People Break Bad Laws shirts. Absolutely awesome, and I really, really appreciated it. It put a big smile on my face. I got home from the protest. I was doing some stuff, and to see this put a smile on my face. So thank you, mate. I do appreciate that. And yeah, so and good on you. And please keep doing what you're doing, mate. You're doing good work. Okay, so if the bill doesn't get through, great, but can another state of emergency ever be called for COVID-19 again? I believe the answer to that is yes. And Daniel Andrews is kind of trying to use that as a piece of leverage. He's basically trying to say, well, if you don't give me these permanent powers, I'm going to have to call a state of emergency again. And do you want that? And our job, and we're doing it well, our job for the last few weeks has been to make the permanent pandemic bill so politically toxic that the crossbenchers would rather that political outcome than to give these permanent pandemic powers. Because keep in mind, the permanent pandemic powers were worse. As originally written, and even with, I believe, all of the amendments that the government have put forward, because they're ignoring all the amendments that have come from the crossbenchers, it is worse than a state of emergency would be. A state of emergency has certain restrictions and certain requirements around it. Now, what's also interesting is if he does reach for the state of emergency again, but we've managed to kill this particular permanent pandemic powers bill, it's going to be very difficult for him to pass any extensions. So remember, he needed the support of the upper house from 3 crossbenchers in order to keep extending the state of emergency. Now, since Adam Somyurek has come back and started voting, he needs a 4th crossbencher, and that's what he's trying to get, and he can't get it. I don't think. He's struggling. He's struggling to get it. So if he then reaches for the permanent if he then reaches for another state of emergency, that'll last for 3 months, and then he's got to try and extend it. And I think he's going to have a very hard time doing that for the same reasons he's having a very hard time actually getting these permanent powers through in the first place. Why are they ignoring the amendments put forward for the bill when he needs them to get an extra vote? One of 2 reasons, and I think both could be true, and it could be a mix of the 2. First reason I would say is hubris, arrogance, the belief that he can bully people and get his way, because that's what his career is built on. He has successfully bullied people and gotten his way over and over again throughout his career. So I think there's a lot of arrogance at play. This belief that you look at the way that he's treated the crossbenchers in the past, the absolute contempt. You only do that if you're an arrogant person. Anyone, even if you have all the support you need, if you are a humble leader or even just an intelligent leader who's not particularly humble, you would still aim to maintain good relationships with the other people that you don't need right now, because politics is a fickle game and you never know when you will need them. Right? You throw them a bone from time to time, give them something to be happy about, engage them in the process in good faith, so that if the day comes when you need them, there's a good chance you've got a relationship there. There's a good chance that they'll come on your side. Daniel Andrews didn't do that because he's an arrogant. You can finish the sentence for yourself. So I think hubris is a big part of it. But I think the other problem is the one that I expressed earlier, where if he waters this bill down too much, it still hurts him politically. Even if he gets the bill through, but it's massively watered down, it still really hurts him. So I think he's afraid that if he were to actually implement some of the amendments that the crossbenchers have brought forward and said, we're not going to support it until this is included or not included or whatever, if he were to go too gung-ho on actually adopting and accepting a lot of those, that he'll end up scoring an own goal. He'll get a piece of legislation through, but the form of that legislation will clearly tell the story that he's no longer in charge. He's no longer the one in power. So Bianca, yes, there is a bit of website overload going on for sure. I know a lot of people have successfully purchased the tea, but look, please just be patient and just keep trying again later tonight, tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning's probably going to be a pretty good bet. There'd be a lot of people going home from the protest that have got the little pieces of paper, and they weren't able to do it at the protest, and they'll be doing it now after dinner, settling down, watching TV, whatever, on their phones. Plus everyone here tonight as well. So it's probably website overload, almost certainly. Okay. Laurel, Topher, can we please have a pee break? I've only been going for an hour and 10 minutes. We've got 3 hours to go before a pee break. March on, soldier. Um, okay, we've got a night owl here. I will order during the witching hour. I did actually want to line up my protest speech from today to play, and you know what, I can do that, but it's going to take me. It's just going to require me to do some stuff while we're chatting. So I will do that, and then everyone will get a pee break. I'm actually, because I'm using a different computer, I'm going to have to rip it off the internet. YouTube downloader. I'm literally going to use a YouTube downloader to rip my own video off the internet to get it onto the new computer, or the other computer, because it's. Oh, there we go. No, that's not the one I want. That's this right now. Let me go over here. Like I said, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to do a little bit of stuff to make this work. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Well, the upload to YouTube hasn't worked. Well, I'm sorry, but if you want a pee break, you're just going to have to fend for yourself. Sorry about that. So Dan says, when I got to see your speech, it was glitchy. So it is up on Facebook now. I can try downloading the Facebook one. It doesn't always work. Let me do that and let me see if I can get it that way. Videos. And there we go. So here's my speech. There we go. Okay. Let me just stop that from playing, grab the link, go to the downloader, and let me see if I can get it for you, because then I can offer you a pee break. And those of you that want to watch it again can watch it, and those that need to do something else, you can do something else. Here we go. Drop the link in, hit download. Yeah, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Topher Field Does Techie Stuff. I'm really bad at techie stuff, by the way. This is not my gifting at all. Okay, I'm downloading that now. So yes, I will be able to play that once that's downloaded. I have to play it off my hard drive. I can't, in this software that I use, if I try and play it off a browser, through a browser window, the audio doesn't come through. And those that have watched a lot of my slow chats, you'll remember I had some issues. You'll remember when I learnt that. Okay. Did we get an attendance number estimate? Look, we've had everything from 20,000 from the police to a couple of 100,000 from Sky News. Who knows what the truth is? It was big. My gut is it was smaller than last week. That's just my gut. All right, that's my. You know me. All right, I try not to buy into hype. So as I looked at it with my own eyes, my gut says that it was smaller than last week, but plenty big enough to make the point that we needed to make and to send the warning that we needed to send. Okay. Has anyone got a picture of the sign? Long-time listener, first-time marcher. 3AW's Heidi Murphy would like to see it. If that sign is yours, or if you got a picture of that sign, maybe get in touch with 3AW. Find Heidi Murphy of 3AW. So who reported the 700,000? I haven't seen where this originated from myself. Look, the march was big, but once everyone was in the park, I can't put my hand on my heart and say that I felt like there were 700,000 people there. That I don't think it was. I don't think it was that. But I'd love to know where that number even came from. It's been floating around. What's the source? If anyone knows where that originally came from. Okay, so Craig says the chopper pilot said it was bigger. Again, one of the news stations, like which chopper pilot? The march was massive, but I do think we were a little bit more spread out. As you look at the photographs, I do think the density wasn't as tightly packed as last week. I mean, listen, it was still a massive number of people. Don't get me wrong, right? But I'm just trying to be honest in my assessment of what I believe I saw. And I don't think I saw as many people as the last week. Other people disagree. So here's Sam, who feels that it was bigger. So there you go. All right. There's different people that that are going to take different takeaways depending on where you are and what you see and how you see it, what your view of that is. You're going to get different sort of come to different conclusions. So that's fair. That's fine. All right, that video is halfway downloaded. So those of you hanging out for a pee break, you're going to get an 8-minute pee break in about 3-4 minutes once that finishes downloading. Okay, so apparently Rod Cullerton is the source of the. I'm assuming this is from the 700,000. SL says, trust me, it was bigger than last week. Okay. David says no less than last week. Yep. Okay. People did spread out more this week, and I think that might be where some of the differences of opinion are coming from. Yeah, and it wasn't as wide this week. Like last week, it was chockers. It was just this sea of people moving down the road. This week, yeah, I tend to agree. I don't think we were quite as wide. I mean, again, I'm not trying to talk it down. It was massive, and it was plenty big enough for what we needed. Remember, what we needed was to have us playing in the back of the minds of the crossbenchers as they come under pressure from the government this week. It's a sitting week. They're going to be hopefully bringing this permanent pandemic powers legislation to a vote and hopefully killing it. We need to make sure that images of us and the sound of us is playing in the back of the minds of all of these crossbenchers. And we achieved that. So we can talk about the numbers all day long. Ultimately, the answer is, how big was it? Big enough. That's the real answer. It was big enough. Okay. Big enough to send a message. 100%. 100%. Okay, so Anne says plenty couldn't fit into Treasury Gardens. Okay, but from where I was standing behind the or out, on the other side of the crowd, there was plenty of space there. So it might have been an access issue where everyone kind of gathered in the spot where they came in from, and that got clogged up maybe, and they couldn't actually get around. It was massive, Sam. It was absolutely massive. Yep, 100%. Beautiful thing to see. Right. Something that I've been hoping for since the very beginning. And yeah, it's happening. It's happening. All right. Yeah. Hey, can I give a huge shout out to everyone that came in from around the state? You guys are amazing. 7-hour round trip from Angela. I know there are so many people, whether it was coming from Horsham, coming from Gippsland, coming from up the Hume Highway, Albury. Someone was commenting before that Albury had about 100 people marching on the streets of Albury. That's probably because you had about 1,000 Albury residents and surrounds down here in Melbourne. They all jumped on buses and came down here. Guys, just huge thanks and huge respect for taking out that amount of time and going to that amount of trouble and the cost, of the petrol and everything else. And it comes at a high cost coming from the Mallee. Thank you, mate. That's a long way to come. Ethan, still on the train out to Shepparton. Goodness me. Still on the way home, Swan Hill. So we're just warming up on the border, 100%. The border zone stuff's just been horrible, guys. I really feel like Melbourne sucks. All the lockdowns and everything that's happened in Melbourne has sucked. Don't get me wrong. But the stuff around you guys have had with that border nonsense is, ugh. Yeah, I'm so sorry for you guys. Oops. Ararat. Swan Hill was a bus load, travelled from South Gippsland. All right. Totally worth it, says Angela. Came from Witchproof, New South Wales border. Oh, it's scrolling too fast. New South Wales border towns support us, and thank you, and we appreciate it. Got back to Loch Sport. Okay, do we have any details on the car convoy next week? I don't really yet. I've tried to reach out to the organisers. I think I've got through to somebody, but I've been mostly focused on today. Then tomorrow's a massive day for me with the documentary. Yes, we're working weekends. And so Monday, hopefully, I'll be able to get some really clear answers on what the plan is. And I'll pass that on to you guys. And depending on how the fundraiser goes through these T-shirts, if I do have some funds to be able to help these guys, then I'm definitely going to be doing that. So it is the anniversary of the Eureka Stockade. I think it's a really symbolically powerful day and a powerful date. And if we can celebrate the Eureka Stockade on the back of this legislation failing, I think that's going to be an amazing piece of symbolism. And I think it's going to be an amazing event to be a part of. So I'm not 100% locked in that I'm able to make it, but I'm trying to make plans so that I can be there and be a part of that, because I think it's going to be it won't be as big just by the nature of having to travel out of Melbourne. We appreciate all you guys traveling into Melbourne. Melbourneites can be snobs that they don't really like traveling out of Melbourne too much. And it's a car convoy, etc. So it's probably not going to be as big an event, but I think it's going to be a powerful and an emotional event, because I've got to say, I do feel like we are beginning to recapture the spirit the Eureka Stockade spirit, I think, is beginning to sort of get recaptured in this movement. I think it's a really beautiful thing. Needs a Eureka t-shirt. Working on it. So Grebo says, how will I pass on the details? I don't do Facebook, etc. I'm on Telegram, t.me/Topherfield. I agree, Hannah. Show your spunk and get to Ballarat. 150 to 200 in Tamworth. Good work. Okay, so apparently RDA, Monica Schmidt, was actually up in the chopper. Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing the images, and I look forward to hearing the estimates and stuff from that. There we go. Sarah, I'm so sunburnt. Yes, me too. Can you tell? Janine, will be great to see you in my hometown next weekend. Hopefully I can make it. Whoa, lots of people on the train to Geelong. Good. Well done. Let's do it again. If I buy a second shirt that isn't an I was there shirt to help you recoup, well, it all comes back to me. If you buy a shirt, yes, it comes back to me. Obviously, this shirt is earmarked. This goes to the protests. And so if that's what you want to do, then this is a shirt for that. If you buy the other shirts or hoodies or whatever, I've got, just in case I get cold, I've got this one here. If you want to buy a hoodie or buy other stuff, this supports me. This, I pay my own bills and I pay my team out of the revenue from the hoodies and shirts and stuff, other than this one, right? This is a specific shirt. The funds go specifically to the protests, and specifically sort of sound systems and technical sort of stuff to make them better. Is my intention with those funds. But yeah, if you add other things to your order that aren't the I was there t-shirt, then they will go directly to me. And I do appreciate it, because yeah, I have a team that's I have 4 part-time people working for me now, helping me to do what I do. That costs money. And so that's what that helps to pay for. I agree. A pink one. You guys in your pink shirts. All right, guys, I'm sorry. I'm having to just skip over heaps and heaps of comments. So Cameron's still having difficulty with the merch link. Just if you could just keep persevering. There are a lot of people that are successfully buying. I think there's just a lot of traffic. The website is not designed to be used in this way. It wasn't when he got his server, the guy that owns the company, when he got the server that he's got, it wasn't with this in mind. I've asked him to do more on his site than what he envisaged, and he's graciously done that for me. But we're now pushing the capacity of his server. So that'll get upgraded this coming week. So yeah, correct. Pink adult nappies. How was the toilet situation today, guys? Was it as bad as last time? There were some toilets there, but yeah, again, just council issues. They weren't able to get any portaloos or anything like that. Councils are not well equipped to deal with fast-moving situations. They take too long to make decisions. They take too long to give approvals and all that sort of stuff. So, the council sort of said to us, "Oh, why didn't you get a permit?" Well, organisers have tried to talk to councils and get permits for things like sound systems in the past, and they get told, "Hey, we'll get back to you in 2 weeks." Well, in 2 weeks, like that's like the distant future as far as this movement is concerned, and we don't know what the lie of the land is going to be in 2 weeks' time. We need to know about this Saturday. That's what we need to be talking about. And literally, again, I'll remind you, 6 weeks ago we were getting shot at. You wouldn't bother asking about a sound system, right? You were never going to bring speakers with you, not big ones anyway. As of 5 weeks ago, that stopped and the numbers started to grow. And as of literally last week is when we finally hit this point where it's like, we need big sound systems. Like it's moving that fast. And when a council is going to take a couple of weeks to consider an application and decide whether they're going to give you a permit, etc., it's too long. They can't move fast enough for the situation that we're in. And the argument that I made, the police and the council were sort of umming and ahhing about whether they were going to allow us to have those speakers there today, and they were very close to shutting us down at one point. And I want to thank the AV company themselves for holding their nerve, but also the organisers of today for getting back down there repeatedly to deal with different council people and different police people, and ultimately getting to the point where they backed off and they allowed us to have the speakers. But I was liaising with the police. I was on the phone with them as I was driving in. My wife was driving, and I was on the phone with them at one point and just saying, "Listen, protest is a human right. It's protected. Part of protest is being able to communicate with your crowd, right? If you being able to actually get a message out and actually be heard by the people that have gathered as a part of your protest. You saw the numbers last week, and I said this to the cop. I said there were at least 100,000 people there, and he said, "Oh, there were more than that." That was his response to me. Like, I lowballed. I just dropped the number right down. I said, "Hey, there were at least 100,000 people there." He's like, "Oh no, there were more than that." And I said, "Okay, well, you get it then." Like, this is those having a capable speaker system that can reach that many people is actually a part of our human right to engage in protest in a modern context. Now, I don't know whether that swung the needle or whether it was the advocacy of others, but ultimately, for whatever reason, the council and the police let us be. We had the sound system as you saw it there. And the feedback that I've had is that people all the way down the back were still able to hear us really, really well. So that is a goal achieved. I'm really, really happy with the way today went from that perspective. Absolutely fantastic. It wouldn't surprise me if there are people within the council who would love nothing more than to shut us down. But you know, it's our right. We have the human right to protest, and Parliament House is inside their little city council area, so that's where we're going to be. Benjamin, we did do a little bit of this. So the if you were there, you would have seen the big frame that the speakers were on. That's been engineered to withstand high winds and to be stable and safe, even in windy conditions like today. One of the things the council said was, "Oh, you're not allowed to use the frame, but you can stack the speakers up." And the AV company turned around and said, "Whoa, that's a massive liability problem because we're no longer using an approved, engineered, safe way of holding the speakers. And in such windy conditions, the speaker tower itself could actually topple and kill somebody." And so they made that argument to them. And the mix of arguments, somehow, for whatever reason, they eventually backed down. Yeah, I agree. I agree. It is our right to have a sound system that is capable of reaching the numbers that we actually have. Okay. I believe the plan for next week is that they're going to have some formalities in Melbourne and then do the car convoy to Ballarat. But don't quote me on that. I'm going to try and get details on that and actually get up there myself to Ballarat is my plan. Okay. This is similar to a question asked earlier, essentially talking about the new variant, super scary, blah blah blah. So let me use a silly analogy, right? Um, there is kind of a rule in film writing that you can't use the same trick twice. So you've got your hero in the story, and they're going through the story, and they run into a problem, and then they remember that they've got this thing in their back pocket that's perfect for the situation, and it gets them through, and they move on, right? And that's okay once. But if they then get to another problem and they go, "Oh, I've got this other thing in my back pocket that's going to get me through this situation," the reader or the viewer is going to be like, "Oh, come on, guys. Seriously? You couldn't come up with something better?" It's the boy who cried wolf, expressed differently in that context, but it's the same principle, right? If you're just doing the same thing over and over again, people very quickly, it loses its effect, it loses its power. And if the governments are reaching for the fear card again, which it does look like they are, that does appear to be what they're doing. Um, I think that indicates to you that they're running out of ideas. They're not able to pivot and do something new and grab people's attention that way. They're just having to amp up the old. All right, guys, I promised you a toilet break. So let me stop sharing the screen from before. Let me share a video file. Go and find it in my downloads. There it is. Alrighty, guys. So this goes for about 8 minutes. I'm going to go and relieve myself and recharge my mug of tea. And yeah, come back in about 8 minutes' time. So if you've already seen it, I apologize. You can watch it again if you want to. Take a break, grab yourself something to nibble on, recharge your drinks, whatever you want to do. If you haven't seen it, enjoy. It was the crowd you guys were fantastic, and I thoroughly enjoyed this moment in time. So thank you and enjoy.
Melbourne, you have made me so incredibly proud. Give yourselves a round of applause. But you know what else blows my mind? It's the people behind the scenes that have made this week and every other week happen. There are so many people whose names you will never know, whose faces you will never recognize. Can we have a massive round of applause for all of our organisers? Now, I have to ask you a question. Can you hear me? How good is this sound system? Right, because my wife is right in front of me here and I have a confession to make.
She's beautiful!
She is beautiful, you're dead right. You better increase that distance, mate. You better just take a step backwards there.
I'm keeping an eye on.
Babe, the money for that sound system that came out of our savings account. And unless I can get it back somehow, I'm going to be sleeping in the doghouse for a while. And that's a problem because we don't have a dog or a doghouse. So here's what I need you to do. I've been passing around cards all day, but this shirt here says, I was there, and it has a picture of Parliament House and today's date. This is my fundraising t-shirt to try and get back the money that I invested into that sound system. It is limited edition, it is available only until midday tomorrow and then it will never be sold again. So if you want one, write this down or punch it into your phone, topherfield.net/I was there. topherfield.net/I was there. Please don't leave me sleeping on the couch. Alright, I see some of my shirts in the crowd there, hello. Alright, I look... Spell it out, TOPHERFIELD. I feel like I'm singing a song now. .net/I was there. The URL is on my Facebook page as well, Topher Field. Now listen, I can't go without making some remarks. I know many of you saw my speech last week. I've had amazing feedback and I thank you for that. But as I look at this beautiful sight, this sea of people, I know that behind every one of your faces is a story. Many of you have shared your story with me by email or on Facebook messages, and I'm grateful for that. Some of your stories have been very hard for me to read, and are even harder for you to live. Many of you have felt like you're losing your mind because you're hurting so much and it feels like you're alone and no one else understands. Look around you. There are people who understand what you're going through. There are people who care about what you've been through. Look around you because you are not alone anymore. We have endured 18 months of an abusive relationship as Daniel Andrews has gaslighted us and has tried to control us, but we are saying no, no more. We are done, and together we are reshaping the future of Victoria. In the last week, we have seen the two biggest political rallies in Australian history. And you can say that you did that. This week, four MPs have announced their retirement from politics. And there are more to come. You did that. That was you. This week, Daniel Andrews has tried desperately to do a deal to pass his enabling act, And if you heard him on the news last night, he was sounding pretty flat. He's losing, we're winning, and you get Daniel's fair weather friends are deserting him. People don't want to be associated with him. His past is coming back to bite him, and his grip on power is starting to slip. You did that! And we won't stop until this job is done. No one is fit to hold the power that Daniel Andrews tried to give himself. I'm not, you're not. Daniel Andrews isn't even fit to run a hot dog stand. He says, I don't recall. Guess what, Dan? We will never forget. Nor will we ever forget the crossbenchers who stand their ground and do what is right and deny Daniel Andrews the power that he so desperately seeks. We will never forget you. I get a lot of heartbreaking messages, but I get some beautiful ones as well. Can I share one with you with permission? This is an email I received after my speech at last week's rally. It says, after last Saturday, I got home. This is from a mother. I put my feet up and I said to my 6-year-old son, you must watch this. And I showed him your speech. And he had it on repeat so many times that I almost got sick of hearing your voice. I don't blame you, I'm sick of it, trust me. Long story short, he's always been a highly intuitive, empathetic, sensitive soul worried about what is next with Dan. And I put him to bed every night with a kiss, and that night he said to me, Mummy, we are the captains now. Hope is rising! We will kill this bill, but we won't stop there. We will see Daniel Andrews turfed out on his oversized ears, but we won't stop there. We will hold politicians and bureaucrats accountable, but we won't stop there. We will not stop until Victoria is the place to be free. And when this battle is won, and it will be won, don't walk away from the war. The war for freedom. This is just a battle. We need you. There are 2 elections next year. One federal, one state. And we need you to stay engaged, to support freedom-friendly minor parties, to become members, to volunteer, to stand on polling booths, to become a candidate even. You may be wondering what difference will I make if I go along. I'm just one person. Well, you're just one person here as well. But look at us. We are all here as just one person, but together we become history in the making. Together we change the future, and together we will turn the state of Victoria into the place to be free.
Okay, that's very, very hard to follow.
Alrighty, we're back. I hope that was long enough for you. I hope you were able to have whatever break you needed. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of what I got to at the end of the speech, because this is really important, and this is something that it's important that you understand, and I know many of you already do, but I'm going to cover it again. But also, you need to be talking to other people about. Because, yeah, sure, there were lots of people there. There are a couple of hundred people watching this live. I can reach 1 million people a month, but obviously that's just sort of, they scroll past a piece of my content. I can do a certain amount to get stuff out, right? And I'm doing the best I can. But if you guys can then start pushing it out amongst your friends, amongst your family, making decisions for yourself about what you want to do and how you want to make a difference, then that just amplifies things so much more, and we can reach so many more people really quickly. And this is the crux of it. Tracy, we can never be complacent again. I cut my speech down a little bit because I was very mindful of how long everything had gone on for by that point in time. But the bit that I skipped over, which was towards the end, I talked about the fact that actually Daniel Andrews is the symptom. He's not actually the problem. The problem is us. And when I say us, I mean all Victorians. A state that would put a man like him into power and then celebrate him as he does what he's done. We're the problem. That's a bad thing. But if we take responsibility for it, it becomes a good thing. Because if we're the problem, we can change. We can change the problem. Right? The problem is, and I've expressed this many times before, and again, I know many of you have heard this, so I apologize, but this is to me, this is the crux of the whole thing. This is so important. We've had it too good for too long. Our ancestors did such a good job of giving us incredible freedoms, incredible prosperity. We stand on their shoulders and we feel like giants, but it's not us who are the giants. It's the people that came before us that gave us something to stand on top of. And there's that expression, and it gets overused, but I'm going to use it again. Good times breed soft people breed hard times, and hard times breed strong people. Strong people breed good times breed soft people breed hard times breed strong people. And I think we've been in a phase, as much as I've absolutely loved this country all my life, born in 1982, brilliant place to live, brilliant place to be born. I mean, how good. The fact is, we've had it really good. And the response to that is we've kind of gone soft. And let me be more specific than just soft. We've become complacent. The classic Australian she'll be right attitude can be our best defense in certain circumstances. To be able to bring that attitude and let the chips fall where they may can be really good. When it comes to politics and power and people that want to own you and control you, that's not a good attitude to approach it with. She'll be right. No. I mean, she might be right for a while, but if you keep taking that attitude for long enough, eventually she won't be right. And that's the situation that we found ourselves in here. Our ancestors were actually so successful at passing on freedom that they, in a way, actually created the opportunity for us to be so apathetic that we would lose that freedom. Now, that's not their fault. That's entirely ours. But that's a good thing because we can learn from that. We can change our behavior. And what can save us from having to go through really hard times is if we get strong, right? If hard times create strong people and strong people create good times, what if, as we see the hard times coming, we get strong before we have to endure the hard times, before we have to have endure a Venezuelan type state for 40 years, a Cuban type state for however long, a Chinese type state for however long. What if before we actually fall all the way down, we stand up and we get strong? We take responsibility for ourselves, for our families, for those around us, for our freedoms, and we grit our teeth and become relentlessly determined to pass those freedoms on to the next generation in at least as good condition as we received from our ancestors, if not even better, even more. And what if we made that our mission from now until the day we die? What if we recognize that that is actually one of the most important jobs that we have in life? It's not just to raise our kids, not just to pay our bills and end up with a nice home and a nice comfy retirement, etc. No, we are custodians of freedom. And it is our job to pass it on to the next generation in as good or better condition than when it was given to us. And if we can together adopt that mentality and that approach and realize that, yes, we've all been activated by this particular battle, the battle against Daniel Andrews and his permanent pandemic powers and all of what's happened with COVID. This is the battle. Excuse me. I just breathed in a mouthful of smoke. This is the battle that has activated us, but this is one battle in a much bigger war. much bigger war. And we need to commit ourselves to not just sit down and go back to being complacent once this battle is won. We need to commit ourselves to staying engaged. Was it Thomas Sowell, I think it was, who said, no, it wasn't Thomas Sowell, definitely wasn't, but I don't remember who it was. Might have been a Mark Twain quote. Or it could be much older than that. Anyway, doesn't matter. It's not mine. It's not original. I'm not claiming it. The price you pay for ignoring politics is to be ruled by lesser men. Right? You can sit there and say, I ignore politics. I'm not interested in politics. It's not my thing. It's too divisive. It's too contentious. It's too whatever. Great. But you condemn yourself to being ruled by lesser men. Another quote that I love on this topic: just because you ignore politics doesn't mean that politics will ignore you. And we're learning that the hard way. We as a generation, and I include myself in this, we've been way too complacent. We've left politics alone. Oh, they're just doing their thing. Doesn't really matter. We've ignored what they were doing, and it's come back to bite us in the ass. We left them alone, but they have most certainly not left us alone. So what does that look like in practical terms? Well, it comes down to the things that I said towards the end of that speech. And there was more that I wanted to say, but I cut it out. We need to do the uncomfortable thing, which is to actually get engaged with politics at a practical level. When I say engaged, measure it like this. It has to cost you something, right? Retweeting things, sharing things on Facebook, on YouTube, whatever, that's good. It does help. It doesn't cost you much. It doesn't hurt. Volunteering to spend time standing on a polling booth for one of the freedom-friendly minor parties, handing out how to vote cards. That's a day in your life. That's time that you're having to invest. Becoming a member of the local branch of a freedom-friendly minor party and contributing to the discussions and the debates and the logistics and the organization and helping it to run better. That costs you something, but it also makes a bigger difference. We need a lot more people, especially good people. If you've got experience in the corporate world, if you've run your own business, hey, if I would say if you're 50 years old and older, you've got life experience that is valuable. Regardless of where that life experience was learned and earned and what you did, you could have been a stay-at-home mum, stay-at-home parent that whole time. But you've lived enough and you've seen enough and you've got something to offer. And we need people with that life experience, that perspective, to be actively getting involved in politics. Not to exclude people younger than that. I'm only 39. But I think there comes a point where people have a real grounding in life experience. And we need people like that to be getting involved with these minor parties. These minor parties are incredibly under-resourced. It's a David and Goliath type situation. So Samuel has asked, will I ever collab with Aussie Cossack? I was chatting with him a little while ago, and I've been planning to have him on a slow chat as a guest. I've stopped having guests while I'm doing the documentary. I'm just doing these to de-stress and to sort of brief and debrief with what's going on. But once I get back to slow chats with guests, he is on the list to have as a guest. Getting engaged with, and here's the power of it. These minor parties are so under-resourced that one extra person who's got their brain engaged and is willing to invest time and effort and energy and pay a price for their engagement with politics. One person can move the needle for these parties. The right person in the right place can really improve things for these parties. They need all kinds of different people with all kinds of different skill sets, from admin and organizing things through to social media and marketing and graphic design, messaging. Some script writers wouldn't go astray for some of these politicians. Right? There's all kinds of different roles that can be played. And if each and every one of us goes, okay, which is the party that I want to support? Which is the party that I resonate with the most? And reach out to them. Find out when the next branch meeting is. Go along to it. Meet the people. Have a good look at the policies. Decide if you can really get alongside them. Got a comment on YouTube. They need young blood. Yes, they do. But young blood needs guidance. Young blood brings enthusiasm, brings energy, a willingness to just get things done. but that is best used with guidance. And often it's life experience and wisdom that can then guide that young blood. So this is my exhortation to you. This is what I want to see, is that these minor parties get so many paid members, so many active members showing up to their branch meetings, so many volunteers willing to walk around, walk the streets and put things in letterboxes, willing to stand on polling booths, willing to help them out in all kinds of logistical ways, marketing and messaging ways. There is so much that needs to be done, and they are so under-resourced and so understaffed. The big parties, they've got money, they've got big donors, they've been doing this for decades, they've got full-time paid professional people doing almost everything that they need done. The minor parties, by and large, do not have any of those resources. They need people with life experience, with some wisdom, with some skills, and the passion and the willingness to pay a price, to invest their time and their talents for no pay, for no remuneration, just simply because they believe in it and they recognize that it's the right thing to do and that it is a crucial part of the fight to protect the freedoms that we have left, to regain the freedoms that we have lost, to create new freedoms, to push into new territory so that when we hand freedom on to the next generation, it is better and bigger and broader than it was when it was given to us. That's what's needed. So can I really encourage you? Look, I'm a big fan of the Liberal Democrats, not the Liberal Party, the Liberal Democrats, okay? They are my choice. They don't have to be your choice. You decide which of the freedom-friendly minor parties you really believe in the most. Read their policies. Yeah, okay, it's boring. But honestly, have a look at what's happening around you and ask yourself, is this a big enough issue, a big enough problem that you should be willing to go through the pain of reading a policy document from a political party? Like, surely, if you can't even do that, then how, are you really in this fight? Are you really actually in this fight, let alone for the long term, right? Go to them, go to their website, read their policies, decide who you want to support, get along to a branch meeting, meet some people, find out how to get involved, find out what they need, and slowly work your way into that party and support them. Give them your energy, your talent, your time, your focus. That can absolutely transform politics. If 1,000 more people around Melbourne, just 1,000, went and didn't just become paid members, obviously you need to do that, you become a paid member, but then went on to get actively involved in the administration, the organization, the manpower, the foot soldiers that are needed. Some becoming candidates, but obviously there's lots of other things that need to be done. Even if you don't want to be a candidate, there's so many other things that need to be done. If 1,000 people in Melbourne went to the minor parties and threw all of their energy, I'm not talking money, like pay your membership fee, sure, but I'm not saying throw all your life savings into a political fund. No. Give them your energy, your time, your talents, everything that you've learned how to do over the course of your career or the course of your life, whatever that looks like. 1,000 people in Melbourne would transform the next election and the election after that, the federal election coming early next year and the state election at the end of next year. All right, I have allowed my cigar to go out, so I'm going to have to just clean that up a little bit. Never relight a cigar with all of the ash on the end. A cigar going out is not the end of the world. Not a big deal. You can relight it and away you go. But just make sure you scrape all of the ash out before you relight it, because otherwise all you're doing as you relight it is heating up the ash. And the first couple of puffs after you start puffing, you're just going to taste ash. And trust me, I know from experience, it ain't great. It ain't great. So just knock all the ash out. Give it a relight. Take your time. Same as when you're lighting the cigar in the first place. Spread the heat around. Make sure it soaks in a little bit. Give it a couple of puffs. And then make sure you puff it a few times because there's very little ash there now. And that means that the heat won't stay in the cherry very well. So you've got to puff it a few times. Okay. That is my hope out of all of this. I don't want to see Daniel Andrews get thrown out on his ear, his legislation defeated, blah, 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 only for us to go back to the old Liberal Labor flip-flop, two different shoes of the same beast, two different wings of the same bird, right? Why? We can't go back to that. That's what got us into this mess in the first place. So I saw someone mention in a comment a hung parliament. Let me talk about that. A lot of people say, oh, what's the point of the minor parties? They're never going to get in power. They don't need to. That's not the point. That's not what we're working for. Not in the first instance. Maybe in time, in a couple of elections' time, that can happen. But for the coming elections, I'm not pretending that we're going to have a Liberal Democratic Party premier in Victoria. That's not going to happen, but it doesn't need to. What needs to happen is there need to be more crossbenchers. Now, crossbenchers at the moment are pretty much only talked about in the context of the upper house because that's where they're more likely to appear. They're just through the way that it works. Minor parties that form this so-called crossbench. So you got your Labor Party, you got your Liberal Party, they're the two majors. Then everyone else is kind of lumped together as this so-called crossbench. In reality, Greens pretty much always side with Labor. Nationals basically always side with Liberal. And so you're left with all of the other parties that are kind of the genuine crossbench in the middle. And our aim has to be to try and make sure that the that the government, so the government is formed by whoever has the majority in the lower house. We need to make sure that whoever has the majority in the lower house does not also have the majority in the upper house. Because if they do, they can just ram through whatever legislation they want. Now, can you imagine if Daniel Andrews had a majority in the upper house? He would have rammed through this pandemic legislation the same way he did it through the lower house. It just passed the lower house, no problem. It would have done the same thing in the upper house. And that would be law in Victoria right now. It is the existence of the crossbench that saved us from that fate up to this point in time and may save us from that fate entirely. That's the importance of the crossbench. So we need to take that one step further. The crossbench in the upper house is good. Crossbench in the lower house is better. Much harder to achieve, but way more powerful. Because here's how it works. In the lower house, whichever party has the majority of the seats can form government. They get to be the premier, the treasurer, education minister, police minister, All of that falls to the party that has a majority in the lower house. In Australia, it is very rare for one party to not have a clear majority in the lower house. It happens, but it's rare. In Europe, it's actually quite common that no party has a majority in the lower house. No party in its own right can just go ahead and form government. And that is a potentially very powerful thing. Imagine a situation where you've got Labor and Greens lower house members on one side, you've got Liberal and National lower house members on the other side. Neither of them have the numbers in the lower house to form government. In the middle, there's a couple of crossbenchers. And for argument's sake, let's say we've got a Liberal Democrat, we've got a One Nation, and we've got a United Australia Party, just for the sake of the argument. Okay, we've got 3 crossbenchers in the lower house. And it so happens that the result of that election was that neither the Liberal Nationals nor Labor Greens can form government without the support of that crossbench, of at least 2 out of those 3. Let's just say it's a perfectly balanced situation. They need two out of those 3 to support them. Now, before I go on with that, the power of the crossbench in the upper house is that a government cannot pass legislation without support from the crossbench. And we're seeing the power of that right now. But imagine the power of a crossbench in the lower house where they cannot even form government in the first place. They don't even get to be the premier or the prime minister. They don't even get to form government and have all of the front bench, all of the cabinet positions and all of the money that comes with that and all of the prestige. So here now you've got the leader of the Liberal Party and the leader of the Labor Party, both desperate to be crowned premier or federally crowned prime minister. But to get that, to be able to wear that crown, they have to negotiate with a lower house crossbench to get the support of that crossbench in order to form government in the first place. Think about the power that falls into the hands of those individuals on that lower house crossbench. And what if that lower house crossbench were to form a coalition and to say, right, there are certain things that we will not support. As a group, all three of us in this particular thought experiment, we're from different parties, but we've all agreed taxes are too high. We're not going to support raising taxes. We're not going to support lockdowns and more restrictions around COVID-19. We will do this, we won't do that. They form a manifesto as a group. And they take that manifesto to the Liberal Party and the Labor Party and they say, agree to this and we will crown you king or premier or prime minister. You get what I mean. The power of that to set the direction of government because they hold the crossbench in the lower house. That's where we have to get to. That's how we can change politics without ever having to have a Liberal Democrat premier or prime minister. We can hold them to ransom and ensure that they do the right things because without us, they don't get to be the prime minister. They don't get to be the premier. That's where we need to get to. And I genuinely believe we can achieve that in these elections that are coming up right now. It's not easy. It's not a given. So here's what has to happen in order for someone to win a lower house seat. And I'm generalizing. Every state's different. If you're watching from New South Wales or WA or whatever, the rules may individual results may vary. But as a general rule, they have to win more than half of the votes after preferences within their own seat. That's what makes the lower house so difficult. To get into the upper house, depending again, federal, state, whatever, you can get in with as little as sort of 7.5%, 8%, right? And on a good day, on a good election, you'll get in with that amount. Otherwise, you need at least 14%. But even so, 14% is a lot easier to get than 50 or 50 plus 1, right? So the lower house is a lot harder to get into. Rebecca, you're absolutely correct. We need to know the candidates in our electorate. I would suggest you especially need to make an effort to get to know the minor party candidates in your electorate. Get to know them personally, know which party they belong to, and pick one to support, pick one to help. So how do we get someone to get 50% plus 1 in their electorate? Oh, well, that's not easy because a lot of people are rusted on Labor voters, Liberal voters. They're stuck and they're not going to change. The number of people that are swinging is much smaller. But we have a moment in history right now with what's happening in Melbourne and the groundswell that we're seeing, the engagement in politics that we're seeing. We have a moment, an opportunity to really change that and to get a number of upset results, potentially in even safe seats. So it's actually possible for a candidate that gets the third most votes to win a seat. Let's do a thought experiment. Let's say you've got a Labor candidate, a Liberal candidate, and a Liberal Democrat, LDP candidate, okay? And we'll ignore the others for the sake of a simple thought experiment. Labor get 45% of the vote. Liberals get 40% of the vote. Oh, sorry, yeah, Liberals get 40% of the vote. My brain's not working yet. And then LDP, let's say, get 15% of the vote. No, sorry. Okay. I need to include other minor parties because their preferences actually matter. So what can happen? Let's say you've got Labor's number 1, Liberals number 2, and LDP is number 3, and then you've got other minor parties, okay, that have all gotten votes. What can happen as we go through the process of preferential distribution? We eliminate the lowest and we distribute their votes to the next preference. And let's say all those preferences go to the LDP candidate who's currently in third. And then the next one gets eliminated. And let's say all of those preferences go to the LDP candidate who was currently in third. But thanks to all of these preferences from all of the other minors flowing to them, they ultimately overtake the Liberal Party candidate. And they have, after preferences, before they've been eliminated, as the preferences are distributed, they actually overtake, they get into second position. And then eventually, the third one on the pile now, after these preferences have been distributed, it's Labor, LDP, Liberal. Now the bottom one, which in this case is Liberal, and it's a pure thought experiment, but this is how it works. The Liberal candidate gets eliminated and all of their preferences get distributed. What if their preferences overwhelmingly went to the LDP candidate and not to the Labor candidate. Then all of a sudden, what you've got is second and third place, Liberal Party and LDP, effectively their votes get combined if all the preferences flow to LDP in this thought experiment. And now all of a sudden, you've got someone who started in third place, who ultimately overtakes second place thanks to the preferences of all the other minor parties. And then thanks to the preferences from the now third place, demoted from second place, they then have enough votes to actually win outright. You can see how difficult that is, right? There's a reason why I said it's hard. We could run candidates in every single electorate and not have this happen. But if we don't run candidates in every single electorate, then there's no chance of this happening, right? So the job of the minor parties right now is to find really good lower house candidates. And let me explain what I mean by really good. Yeah, it's gone out again. A good lower house candidate for a minor party is someone that is already known in their community. It's someone who already has networks and friendship groups within that community. People that if they say, hey, I'm running, they have friends that will stand on polling booths for them, handing out how to vote cards. They have people that will stuff letterboxes with flyers. They have people that will tell their friends to vote for this guy or this girl, okay? Someone who's already got a certain amount of public profile. They don't have to be a celebrity and known around Australia. They need to be known within their community, because we're only talking about the votes that come from within that particular community. That's what matters when you're being elected into the lower house, is inside that electorate. And then we need an intelligent voting base, and this is what I'll be working on between now and the upcoming elections next year, that understand the importance of preferences and preference flows and voting for every single freedom-friendly minor party before you vote for any of the major parties. If you put a major party, if you let's say you vote for your favorite minor party that's freedom-friendly, and then you vote for a major party, and then you vote for other freedom-friendly minor parties, your preference is probably going to stop on that major party, because they're never going to be down the bottom and get eliminated and have that preference distributed. They're already up the top. If you vote for all of the freedom-friendly minor parties, then what's going to happen is some of them will perform well, some of them won't. That's fine. The ones that don't get eliminated, and the preference, if that's who you voted for, your preference goes to the next one or to the one further up. And you give them the opportunity to overtake some of these bigger parties because they accumulate so many preferences. So our job is to do two things: to support the minor freedom-friendly parties, to help them logistically, to help them organizationally, to help them run a good campaign, to help them find good candidates that have good traction in their local community, and then to educate the voter base to vote for them, but then also to preference all the other freedom-friendly minor parties before they vote for any majors. And the combination of those two things happening in every single electorate all over Australia or all over Victoria, depending on the election, gives us a half-decent shot at a couple of upsets here and there. It's not going to be a lot, right? This is hard. This is not easy stuff. But we give ourselves a shot at a couple of upsets. And yeah, one might be Liberal Democrats, and another one might be UAP, and another one might be One Nation, or whoever it is. But that's how we form that crossbench. It's relatively easy in the upper house. It's very difficult in the lower house. But we have to accept this as our challenge. Our goal for the upcoming elections, the state election at the end of next year, the federal election early next year, is to try and create a lower house crossbench. All right? And that's why I say it is so important for you to decide which party you want to support and then give them that support. Give them your time, your energy, your talents, pay your membership fee, show up to the branch meetings, get involved in the discussions, get involved in the logistics, get involved in the legwork, and give ourselves a fighting chance so that across Victoria, there'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 upsets in the state election. Across Australia, there might be 5 upsets. Across the entire country, most of the people that throw their energy into this campaign will fail. And I say that euphemistically. It's not a failure. This is, each individual electorate is a long odds gamble. Each individual electorate has a pretty minimal chance of succeeding. But if every electorate goes for it and every electorate enjoys the support of people like you, then we have a realistic chance of this happening a couple of times in each election. And that is how we form that lower house crossbench. And that is how we give ourselves a shot at having freedom-friendly politicians being the kingmakers that the two major parties have to negotiate with if they want to wear the crown. And that's how we turn this fight and all of the energy coming from this fight and all of the renewed interest in politics that Daniel Andrews has stirred up within Victoria. That's how we translate that into a real, tangible, meaningful political outcome going forward. All right. I hope that makes sense. All right. This is now shifting from thinking about the fight right now, the upcoming week. Is the bill going to pass? Is it not? Etc. All of that's important. Of course it is. But we need to be thinking already further ahead. Federal elections coming up in the second quarter, or possibly even the first quarter of next year. That means you need to be thinking about which party you're going to support this year. You need to be showing up to branch meetings as soon as they restart in the new year, or even in this year if they haven't finished yet. You need to be getting behind them, getting to know them, finding out what they need, and figuring out how you can help. Because if we all do that, we can actually change the political landscape in this entire country in a single election. We just have to be willing to do the work. All right. So that is my encouragement to you tonight. I really want to stir you up to get you to go, okay, freedom matters. And I'm committed to passing freedom to my kids. We can't replace the system that we have. It's not feasible from where we are right now. There are people who say, oh, you shouldn't engage with the system at all. Okay, that's nice. But if you don't engage with it, you are condemned to be ruled by lesser men, right? You can ignore it all you want. It's not going to ignore you. So instead, let's get really clever about how we engage with it. Let's be really focused in how we use our energies, but let's use our energies and give ourselves a shot at making something like this happen in the federal election, in the state election, or in a perfect world, both. And then we can build from there. We can talk about future elections. We can maybe get to the point where the major parties are actually fading away and other parties are coming through and taking their place. That's achievable, but I don't think it's achievable in this election. We need to establish a foothold first and a lower house crossbench. I mean, the upper house crossbench is important. We're seeing that in Victoria right now, but a lower house crossbench, that's the next step. That's what we need to achieve and we need to be focused on. So guys, I'm going to leave that with you. But I hope that plays in your head and bothers you until you eventually actually put some actions to it and get out there and find the party that you want to support. Okay, I'm going to sign off real soon, but I'm going to do one last plug. I'm going to put in the URL again, topherfield.net/I was there. If you want to help me not be sleeping in a doghouse, then please head over there. Buy one of these I Was There t-shirts. Yes, anyone can buy them. Technically, you don't have to have actually been there, but obviously being there with us in spirit and supporting us and helping me to pay for that sound system that did its job. Everyone could hear, which is fantastic. But if you can do that, that'd be great. People are saying, yep, the t-shirt shop is broken. It has been absolutely overwhelmed by the traffic. It was never intended to be used the way that I'm using it. The guy who runs it is upgrading the server next week, but unfortunately we couldn't get that done in time. So yeah, just please persevere. Brad, I know, is working on it. I'll touch base with him as soon as we're finished here. I'll give him a call. I'll touch base with him and see if anything else can be done to improve how that works. But have another go tonight. Have another go tomorrow morning. They will be taken down from sale at midday tomorrow. So please just do persevere, be patient, and try and get through between now and then. And fingers crossed, you will succeed. So, yeah. So Helen is saying we could hear you right from the other end of the gardens. Yeah. Well, that's why I did it. That's why I paid for it, because I think that's so important. And money can't let me finish without one last shot at the pink teas. I will talk to him about pink teas. I will do that in this conversation I'm about to have with him right now. Okay. Could I extend the sale? Well, guys, just persevere tomorrow. I will be active on the Facebook page tomorrow, and just persevere, and I'll touch base and hear from people whether they've been able to get through or not. Yes, depending on how it goes. I mean, if I've already met my budget, then no, I'm not going to extend the sale, because I don't just want to be collecting money. That's not the point of this. But if the budget is still a bit short, I may extend the sale a little bit just to allow people who weren't able to get on. But please don't count on that. Please just be trying tonight, tomorrow morning, and then through to midday tomorrow would be much appreciated. All right, guys, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. I thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for getting engaged in politics. We are seeing things that we've never seen before in Victoria, in Australia, and we need to make the most of this opportunity. So thanks, guys. Bye.